Hey, everybody. I am very happy to be here with Christina Harvey, who is the Executive Director of Stand Up America. Christina, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on today. And thank you for building this amazing platform and using it for good.
Well, building a platform and using it for good, I think you've got me there with about 2 million people in your community, but that'll be something we kind of mentioned because I would love to give a quick background for you, just for our audience to know who you are and where you came from and how you got here. You were the former senior advisor to the New York State Attorney General and Executive Director of the Attorney General's Transition Committee, a former chief of staff in the New York State Senate, veteran of two statewide electoral campaigns, and a number of state senate and other local campaigns, former union organizer as well. Proud daughter of labor, you are a native of West Virginia. You live in New York City now. You have a master's in public and nonprofit management and policy from New York University. And when you're not fighting for the democracy that we deserve, you're hanging out with your husband and daughter and dodging traffic in New York City, which is probably the most courageous thing of all, and that's saying a lot. How does a native of West Virginia wind up in the middle of New York state politics and then become executive director for an organization like Stand Up America?
Yeah, well, I think politics were always a part of my life. When I was growing up in West Virginia, I'm literally a coal miner's daughter from West Virginia, the cliche right there. Growing up in West Virginia, every 3 years, my mom worked at the local phone company. And every 3 years, I would be on the picket line with her. Every time a contract came around for renewal, the company wanted to cut benefits, they wanted to cut pay, and they would end up on strike. So I was on my first picket line at 6 years old. So when I graduated from high school and I came to New York for college, and I stayed. Made my journey to Stand Up America after working as a union organizer and working in New York government for a time. And after 15 years of working in New York government, it became really clear to me that there are so many structural problems with our democracy that prevent our government from really doing the work that is needed and representing the needs of all of the American people. No matter what your economic situation, your race, or where you live. And really, that's what brought me to Stand Up America, where I have the opportunity to join with our amazing members every day and fight for a more representative democracy.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing. I always think it's amazing when people go bigger than just a single politician into the structural kind of, ongoings of our democracy and the things that make it go. So thank you for doing that. I think those are the machinations behind the scenes that make it all go and make it all hopefully represent us and continue to represent us. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been an amazing journey over the last 6.5 years at Stand Up America. Stand Up America was founded in 2016 after Trump was elected, and we started out really just responding to whatever bad thing the Trump administration was trying to do back then, whether it was repealing the Affordable Care Act or nominating problematic folks to the Supreme Court like Brett Kavanaugh. But pretty quickly, we pivoted and became an organization that was entirely focused on democracy because it was clear that Trump was not only a threat to our democracy, but that there were real structural problems with our democracy that his election was a symptom of. So since then, our 2 million members in every congressional district in the country are taking action every day to protect and strengthen democracy, whether that's making a phone call to their federal lawmaker to say, we don't support a bill that would make it harder for us to vote, or we support reforming the Supreme Court, or reaching out to their state level lawmakers to say, hey, I want you to pass this public financing of elections bill because I think that the ultra wealthy have too much of a role in our policies and our elections, or signing up to volunteer to help elect a pro democracy candidate.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we all got caught off guard by was, Trump showing up, and we thought he might be a flash in the pan, a really dark flash in the pan. But then it became evident, like you were saying, that there were systemic problems inside of our democracy itself. And as we watched institutions and individuals just flip over to serve him, and then now coming back around to another administration where that's the wholehearted purpose, is it appears to be serving Donald Trump. But that doesn't happen without systemic failures like Citizens United and voting laws, suppression laws, and all those things, allowing those things to happen, and individuals being in positions of authority and responsibility, and then ceding that over to Trump, like we see with the House all the time now, where they've just pulled war resolution powers, all those things, and given them straight to Trump. I know that there are things going on right now that you are highly involved in, things that are basically on the timeline, to include the potential government shutdown or partial government shutdown with DHS, Department of Homeland Security, where most of the government was funded a few weeks back. There was a 2-week extension to talk about funding DHS, of which ICE is included. ICE, as I think the audience will know, got $75 billion last year as part of the Big Beautiful Bill. Usually they think they got about 12 to 18 per year, and they got 75 billion, which now their funding is greater than the U.S. Marines. And with everything going on in Minneapolis, including the death of 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, the abduction of Liam Ramos, Keith Porter as well, who some forget, it's been one of those things where the national backlash has been appropriate, I think. And this includes across the spectrum, where 75% of voters now say that it should either be reformed or abolished. And the deadline approaches. Do you have any insight on negotiations and how that is going, or what you expect to happen? I know there's procedural votes today, but then the vote is supposed to be tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I am cautiously optimistic that Democrats are not going to fold and that we won't have another continuing resolution. So I'm cautiously optimistic. That said, I think that they haven't folded yet because they're hearing a tremendous amount from their constituents. I know, for example, the Monday morning after Alex Preddy was killed, our members alone drove 100,000 constituent contacts to their lawmakers demanding real reforms to ICE before they get another cent. And over the time period between the Friday before he was killed and now, our members have driven 300,000 constituent contacts. And they're not the only ones. Millions of Americans across the country are
Absolutely.
reaching out to tell their lawmakers that something has got to change. We cannot have masked bands of ICE agents roving through the streets of Minnesota or any other state, indiscriminately stopping people, asking them for their papers, harassing people, arresting, harming, murdering American citizens, pepper spraying children. It's just absolutely out of control. And, you heard me say earlier that we're an organization that's entirely focused on democracy. And in the past, we would not have envisioned it being in our lane that we would be advocating around the Department of Homeland Security or ICE. But in addition to this being an immigration issue, a human rights issue, this has also become a democracy issue. Because what's happening right now in Minnesota and, in other places like Maine and in other pockets of the country is not democracy. It is fascism creeping into our streets. In a democracy, you should be able to walk down the street in your own neighborhood without fear of being harassed or harmed by your government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I think I've been buoyed by, or seen optimism or felt optimism, is the court system so far. The federal judges, local judges. I believe there was just a decision passed today where those who did not receive due process now need to receive a hearing either here or abroad at a place of their choosing. We've witnessed these attacks on citizens of the United States, human beings, just in general. One of those events was the arrest of Don Lemon. And following a protest, I believe it was on January 18th, inside of a church where one of the pastors was the acting or is the acting field director for that area for ICE. And Don Lemon showed up there to witness that, to record that as a journalist, not as an activist, not as a protester. And now he has been arrested along with several others on conspiracy and I believe taking away the rights of people to exercise their or to peacefully worship. And I can't remember the exact verbiage of that, but you talked previously about democracy being worrisome right now, and all of these attacks on democracy, and people walking down the street without fear for their safety. And now we're seeing another attack on freedom of the press. And I think his hearing it's a big week. I think his hearing is also tomorrow. Based on other decisions in the freedom of the press realm and what you've been hearing, what would you say we could expect out of that in that decision?
Well, I'm certainly not a member of his legal team, but I
Right,
am
right.
cautious. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic because it is clear that he did nothing wrong. He was simply doing his job, reporting on the facts of what were happening that day and bearing witness. And I think he was arrested and is being targeted by the Trump administration, not because he did anything wrong, but because they are so afraid of anyone who bears witness to the illegalities and the atrocities that this administration is committing. And he's not the first one who they've targeted for bearing witness. Part of the reason why ICE and the federal government are so mad at the folks who are in the streets that they're encountering in Minnesota is because that's exactly what they're trying to do every day. They're average Americans who are filming, who are recording, who are trying to bear witness to what the federal government is doing right now. And they are the only reason why we nationally know enough about what's really happening there for Americans when you call them up and say, what's your position on more funding for ICE? What's your position on reforming ICE? They know enough to say something has to change. I'm not okay with this. And that's because people like Don Lemon and average Americans and Georgia Fort, who was arrested too, who's a local journalist from Minnesota, because those folks are standing up and bearing this.
Yeah, I think it would be a much different realm if they were able to control the narrative as much as they would like. And when you have 100 people with cameras all recording the same incident, it's hard to say that someone was a terrorist or was attempting to kill an officer when, your eyes don't lie. But they're trying. They're certainly trying. They're trying to minimize those voices, as with Mr. Lemon and others, and hopefully they can get away with it. And in these cases, they haven't. So the power of the American people and their ability to observe. And now I'm not a great fan of social media, but it sure is helping in some ways get the word out when you have a potential fascist government trying to take over and control the narrative. Speaking of fascist potential takeovers of the country, midterms are coming up. And something else that is happening is another attempt to pass the SAVE Act, which just passed the House, I believe, yesterday for the second time. The first time it was stopped in the Senate. Now it is making a return, which would require proof of citizenship to include a passport, to include birth certificate, naturalization orders, things like that, all of which I believe cost money to get. So in essence, it's a poll tax. And then for married individuals, women who have changed their name, now that could require multiple versions of identification. When you have, 50% don't have a valid passport, 10% don't know where their birth certificate is. Kansas passed a law like this where 31,000 US citizens it made it more difficult for them to vote. They weren't able to register to vote when Kansas passed this law. And all of the narrative is that we have to prevent, non-citizens from voting, when I believe the Bipartisan Policy Center just came out and said it's 0.02 or 002% of all voting has been found to be from a non-citizen. So it just appears to be another way to suppress the vote, as they tried to do in Kansas. I know this is one of those things that your organization, voter suppression, you really kind of tie into and you work on. What are the things that people can do besides talk to their senator, besides talk to their representative? What can they do to help prevent something like this, where the government is deliberately trying to remove their ability to vote?
Well, I'll say first, it is important to talk to your senator and representative. And I would encourage folks even who have Republican senators who may see their senators as a lost cause to still
Absolutely.
reach out and contact their senators. And the reason why is because this bill didn't pass last year because it couldn't make it around the filibuster, because there wasn't sufficient Democratic support for the bill in the Senate. But this year, some senators and members of the House are pushing to eliminate the filibuster or do a workaround of the filibuster so that they can pass the bill just with Republican support. And right now, there are 53 Republican senators. 3 of them aren't supporting this bill. We have McConnell is a no, Murkowski is a no, Collins is a no. 50 votes is enough to create an exception to the filibuster. So we need Republicans to understand that if they are going to decide to go around the filibuster on something or blow up the filibuster, this is not the issue to do it on, because this is not the issue that is going to have the popularity with their constituents that they think it will have. I would also ask folks to just, if you have a social media account, if you have access to social media, just post the facts on social media. And the facts are, Republicans are saying this is a voter ID bill. It's not a voter ID bill. It's a bill that would require you to show up in person with a passport or a birth certificate. So in order to register or in order to update your registration. And not just that, which is already expensive and cumbersome, right? We know there are counties in the United States where once people paid for these documents and got these documents, they might have to drive 8 hours round trip in order to take them to the local board of elections in some of the larger rural counties in the United States. So that's bad enough. But the new version of the SAVE Act, which passed yesterday, which is called the Save America Act, doesn't just do that. It would also force states to hand over voters' personal data to the Department of Homeland Security. Kristi Noem's Department of Homeland Security, the same agency that is violating the rights of U.S. citizens and immigrants every day, would both have access to voters' personal data and would have the ability to flag people and tell states, oh, this person really shouldn't be on the rolls, creating
This is
all
this is
sorts of
as they
problems.
raid. This is as they raid, election offices in Georgia.
Yes, as they raid election offices in Georgia, because Trump apparently is still looking for those 11,000 votes that he illegally asked the Georgia Secretary of State
Right.
for in 2021.
Right. Yeah. It seems like there's no end to which they will not go to, one, try to overturn the 2020 election, but then potentially try to, I'm going to say it, rig the 2026 election, and then beyond. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Like, what are the things that give you optimism when you look around and see what's happening? Because you're very tied in. Everybody's worried about the election. There's some concern that 2024 had issues. People are concerned, and that's a potential suppression possibility for 2026. Like, why should I vote? Why would it matter? What would you tell people as they get ready to vote in the 2026 election that might motivate them and give them hope and give
Well,
them
first, I
optimism?
would say that it is clear that when we speak up, we can have an impact. For example, on the SAVE Act, there were half a dozen or so Democrats in the House that actually voted for the SAVE Act last year. They didn't vote for it again because they
Yep.
were
Yep.
hearing from millions of their constituents about why they opposed it. Today, we saw Tom Homan announce that they were going to be winding down the ice surge in Minnesota. Now, while I don't trust them as far as I could throw them, um, the fact that
Right.
whether
Absolutely.
it happens or not, the fact that they even feel the need to say that means that the folks who are putting their necks on the line every day, protesting and witnessing in Minnesota, and the folks across the country who are calling Congress every day actually are having an impact. So we can have an impact. And as we come up to the 2026 election, it will be incredibly important for Democrats to take back control of the House of Representatives, because if nothing more, that would prevent Trump from passing another billionaire budget, because we wouldn't have a House of Representatives that would simply rubber stamp his billionaire budget. It would give the Democrats in the House of Representatives the ability to at least try to hold Trump accountable. So as we lead up to the 2026 election, I would say to folks, it is possible. it is possible that at a minimum, the Democrats can take back the House. Folks should show up. They should volunteer. They should vote. They should talk to their friends about voting. And they should, if they live in a state like Maryland, for example, or a state like Virginia, they should reach out to their lawmakers and say, look, we've got to level the playing field. Trump went out there and pressured Republican states to gerrymander and add all of these Republican seats. And if we want to at least have a chance of electing a pro-democracy Congress, Maryland's got to redistrict too. Virginia's got to redistrict too. We need to urge our elected officials to fight back.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is one of the things that people are concerned about is I think they feel the representation has not quite been there, in a lot of cases where it seems like public opinion on things are, especially for Democrats, are, off the charts in certain areas, but the representation in DC just hasn't quite met that. Uh, but it feels like with the right amount of pressure, and obviously people worried about keeping their jobs, that does seem to change. It's like just like you mentioned in Minnesota, and other spaces. So if people wanted to get involved, with Stand Up America, what would you
They
suggest
can
they do?
text STAND to 63033 and they will get on our text list. And that means they'll get updates and actions they can take, whether it's contacting a lawmaker, showing up for a protest, showing up to volunteer, or any of the other things our members do. And if they want to take an action right now, today, they can text SAVE to 63033 and contact their lawmaker about the SAVE Act, or text ICE to 63033 and contact their lawmaker and say no more money for ICE without reforms.
That's perfect. And yes, more protests, please. Like the winter is fading, so I think everybody is going to be in um mega protest mode for 2026. So we'll be looking forward to those. Christina Harvey, thank you to you and your entire team for everything that you have done, everything you're doing, everything you're going to do to help protect this democracy and the citizens within it. We
Thank
really
you. I say
appreciate
the
it.
same to you.
Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Take care.